an undefeated assassin, betrayed and killed by his own master for being too dangerous. But death was not the end for him. He was reborn as the son of the strongest family on the continent. With a second chance and memories of his past life, he swears to take revenge on those who betrayed him. Will he succeed in fulfilling his vengeance in this new world? Without further ado, let's dive into the story. Under the full moon, its light barely piercing through the thick clouds, Rayon, a genius assassin from the shadowy organization in Shadow, had dedicated his entire life to killing. But one day, he heard a chilling whisper. His death would come at the hands of his own master, Deus Robert. Returning from a mission, Rayon reported his success to Robert. He was praised for his outstanding contributions to strengthening the family. Yet, in the middle of the conversation, Rayon suddenly realized something. The indoctrination binding him had vanished. Indoctrination was a technique the Robert family used to control assassins from childhood. But Robert already knew. Shocked, Rayon asked how his master had discovered this. With a cold smile, Robert revealed a horrifying truth. Aside from indoctrination, he had also implanted a rage worm inside Rayon's body. This creature didn't just ensure complete obedience, it could also devour its host's heart if they ever dared to resist. Worse still, it could read emotions. With a snap of his fingers, Robert activated the rage worm. Instantly, Rayon was overwhelmed by unbearable agony as his heart was consumed from within. After years of being shackled, he had finally felt a glimmer of hope thanks to the Ring of Fire technique, which had freed him from Robert's control. But in an instant, that hope was shattered. Knowing his end was near, Rayon made a desperate attack against Robert, but failed. In a single swift motion, his head was severed. As his consciousness faded, Rayon screamed in his heart, begging any god or devil to grant him another chance for revenge. Then, the impossible happened. Instead of perishing, Rayon found himself reborn in the body of a young boy with golden hair. Even more shocking, his name was still Rayon. At first, he thought it was just a dream. But as time passed, he began to accept the truth. He had been reborn into a wealthy family. Yet, unlike in his previous life, Rayon wanted to learn more about his family. Unfortunately, as a mere baby, his actions were still severely limited. One day, while spending time with his mother, a servant suddenly rushed in, his face pale with panic. With a trembling voice, he announced that the lady's father was arriving at the mansion. Sylvie, Rayon's mother, gasped. She quickly ordered the servants to prepare, but it was already too late. The man had already arrived, standing at the entrance with an air of undeniable authority. At that moment, Rayon froze. His grandfather was none other than the ruler of the continent's strongest family, the destructive king of the north, Glenn Sieghart. In that instant, Rayon realized the truth. He had been reborn into the mightiest family on the continent. Trying to ease the tension, Sylvie offered her father to hold his grandson. Expressionless, Glenn accepted, lifting Rayon into his arms. With a calm voice, he said, "The name Rayon carries meaning. Live in silence, without causing a stir, like a shadow." Night fell. Unable to sleep, Rayon made up his mind. He would train in the Ring of Fire. To him, revenge against Deus Robert was no longer just a dream, it was his destiny. But as he began his training, he noticed something strange. The mana circuit in his body felt icy cold. At first, he considered breaking through the frost using the Ring of Fire. However, another thought crept into his mind. Wouldn't it be a waste to get rid of such powerful cold energy? A sudden idea struck him. What if he combined the flow of fire with the chilling energy within his body? Carefully, he attempted to merge both forces, rotating them in harmony. Slowly, he gained better control over his mana circuit. However, his infant body couldn't withstand the strain. Exhausted, he fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, while playing with his mother, a stranger arrived at the mansion. Rayon recognized him immediately. He was the rugged saint, the greatest healer on the continent. The saint had come to examine Rayon's condition. However, once the diagnosis was complete, his expression darkened. With a heavy voice, he declared that Rayon was afflicted with a deadly curse of frost. This curse sealed his mana circuit with blocks of ice, hindering the flow of energy and greatly diminishing his chances of ever becoming a swordsman. Even worse, it also shortened his lifespan. If left untreated, Rayon would die young. Sylvie's face turned pale. Then, unable to hold back her emotions, tears streamed down her cheeks. With a shaking voice, she cried out, "I'll do anything! Please save my child!" Throughout his previous life, Rayon had never experienced a mother's love. But seeing her cry like that, his chest tightened. Without hesitation, Sylvie rushed to her father, who was still speaking with the saint. Desperately, she dropped to her knees before him. "Father, please, save Rayon!" Yet Glenn remained unmoved. His face was cold, devoid of emotion. In a chilling voice, he replied, "It's useless. I will not help you." The only thing he could offer Rayon was the Sieghart name. With that, Glenn dismissed Sylvie without hesitation. To him, there was nothing more to discuss. The saint who witnessed the event asked why Glenn didn't tell his daughter the truth, even though he was the one who ordered him to come and examine Rayon's condition. Glenn remained silent for a moment, then changed the subject by asking the saint to explain Rayon's condition to him. The saint explained that 9 of Raon's mana circuits were blocked by a curse, and it would become more dangerous as he aged. He also added that it was nearly impossible for Raon to become a swordsman in the future. Hearing this, Glenn remained calm and stated that it was not an issue as long as Raon could survive. 2 years passed. Thanks to his regular training and the elixirs provided by the saint for treatment, Raon finally reached the first stage of Ring of Fire. Time flew by. Raon was now 5 years old and had formed his second Ring of Fire. However, despite reaching this stage, the curse of frost and poor stamina still remained. Even so, Raon did not want to rush. He felt that he still had plenty of time to grow and continued his cultivation. Raon initially wanted to train again, but had to stop when his mother entered the room, reminding him to get ready. Today was the day they had to go to the Zeekhart family's main hall. Upon arrival, Raon and his mother immediately drew attention due to the bad rumors surrounding them. However, they ignored the whispers and continued forward. Not long after, the head of the family, Glenn Zeekhart, entered the room. Without saying much, he immediately drew his massive sword of judgment to begin the judgment ceremony. The purpose of this ceremony was to gather children from different family branches and measure their mana potential. The first child called was Burin Zeekhart, who possessed the wind attribute. Next was Runan Sullian, who had the ice attribute. Finally, the last name called was Raon Zeekhart. As he stepped forward, Raon immediately received contemptuous gazes from those around him. He had no high expectations because his body was still affected by the curse. When Raon placed his hand on the giant sword, he suddenly saw a flash of memories stored within it. In that vision, a blonde swordsman was seen battling numerous monsters. Shocked, Raon quickly regained his senses and saw that his mana attribute was incredibly small, not even reaching the halfway point. The people watching sneered and looked at him with mockery. Shortly after, Glenn ended the ceremony and ordered the attendees to leave. Even though Glenn had expected this outcome, he still felt disappointed by Raon's result. However, after the attendees had left the room, Raon's residual mana in the Sword of Judgment suddenly began to expand. The sword then radiated a golden light, resembling the sun, a phenomenon known as the Golden Flame. This phenomenon was extremely rare. In the entire history of the Zeekhart family, the Golden Flame had only appeared once before. 7 years passed since the Judgment Ceremony. Now, Raon was close to reaching the third stage of Ring of Fire and had turned 12 years old. That day, he returned to the main estate to attend the closing ceremony of the Judgment Ceremony. During the closing event, Glenn suddenly reminded Raon that he would be participating in basic training as a new member of the family. Hearing this, Raon looked confused. He was only being told now, while everyone else had known about it a month ago. When the announcement was made, Raon's mother suddenly opposed the decision, arguing that Raon was not yet fit to undergo basic training due to the frost curse in his body. Glenn, upon hearing this, seemed displeased and firmly stated that there were no exceptions or rejections for those who had received the Zeekhart name. Despite Sylvie's desperate pleas for more time, she realized that her efforts were futile now that Raon had inherited the family name. The onlookers sneered and mocked her with disdainful gazes. Seeing his mother being humiliated, Raon could not remain silent. He stepped forward and accepted Glenn's command to participate in Zeekhart's basic training. Observing his grandson's determination, Glenn decided to test him by exerting the pressure of someone who held the title, Destructive King of the North. Raon refused to back down and endured the crushing force to prove he was worthy of the Zeekhart name, though in the end, he lost consciousness due to the overwhelming pressure. The next day after the ceremony, Raon immediately resumed training in preparation for the upcoming training camp. Meanwhile, at the 5th training ground of the Zeekhart family, Glenn visited a red-haired man known as Sword of Light, Rimmer Diaz. Rimmer assumed that Glenn had come to ask him to go easy on Raon, just like Sylvie had previously requested. However, he was mistaken. Instead, Glenn ordered Rimmer not only to maintain the intensity of the training, but to increase it if necessary. Hearing Glenn's command, Rimmer became even more intrigued by Raon, despite how weak the boy was. On the other hand, Raon continued his preparations and finally reached the 3rd stage of Ring of Fire through consistent training, but this was merely the beginning. The training within the Zeekhart family was notoriously difficult, and achieving the 3rd stage of Ring of Fire was only the foundation. The night before the training camp began, Sylvie visited Raon's room. She wanted to talk to him, trying to persuade him to delay the training for a year out of concern for his well-being. However, Raon remained resolute in his decision. He wanted to prove himself to those who belittled both him and his mother. Seeing her son's unwavering determination, Sylvie finally decided to reveal the reason they lived alone and why they were despised by many. It all started when Sylvie fell in love and deliberately destroyed her mana circuit so she could leave the Zeekhart family. However, her happiness did not last long. A member of Eden recognized her face and launched a sudden attack on them. Raon's father, who was not particularly strong, and Sylvie, who was pregnant at the time, were unable to resist. By the time reinforcements arrived, it was too late. Raon's father had been killed in the assault. With nowhere else to go, Sylvie was forced to return to the Zeekhart family. That was why she was hated by so many. Upon hearing his mother's story, Raon felt that what she did was selfish, abandoning her duty to the family for the sake of personal happiness. But at the same time, she was also the one who gave him this new life and showered him with love. No matter how others labeled her as selfish, to Raon, Sylvie was still his one and only mother in this second life. Raon reassured Sylvie that he would be fine. After their conversation, he resumed training Ring of Fire, hoping to reach the intermediate stage. However, in the midst of his training, a sudden blue flame erupted before him, taking the form of a spirit. The being introduced itself as Wrath Spirit. The spirit demanded that Raon surrender his soul and body as an offering to exact revenge. Initially, Wrath Spirit seemed surprised that the one before him was merely a child. However, after peering deeper into Raon's heart, he realized that within this boy lay an unfathomable rage. Raon refused the spirit's offer, but Wrath Spirit was relentless. It attempted to provoke Raon's anger, forcing him to succumb. Fortunately, Raon managed to resist the temptation using Ring of Fire, the very technique he had trained so diligently. Not only did he withstand the spirit's influence, but to his surprise, he also gained a new ability, an authority belonging to Wrath Spirit called Status Window. It turned out that the system that had always appeared before Raon was actually created by the spirit itself. When Raon asked for further explanation, the spirit refused, claiming it had no reason to tell him more. Annoyed by the spirit's attitude, Raon told it to leave. However, instead of disappearing, the Wrath Spirit transformed into a bracelet that could appear at any time. The next day, at Zieghart's 5th training ground, a large crowd gathered for the Zieghart family's training selection. It wasn't just the main family's descendants, but also children from collateral families, recommended candidates, and those from subordinate families. As expected, as soon as Raon arrived, many people started whispering about him. Hearing their gossip, Raon directly confronted them, challenging them to say it to his face. Feeling provoked, some of the kids grabbed Raon's clothes as if trying to start a fight. However, before things escalated, Buren Zieghart stepped in and stopped them. But rather than helping, Buren only added fuel to the fire by provoking Raon further. Raon tried to remain calm, but in the end, he responded to Buren's provocation. Just as a fight was about to break out, Rimmer suddenly appeared and put an end to it. The training event officially began. Rimmer explained that, out of the 160 participants, only a quarter would advance to the next stage. This announcement shocked many of the children, as it meant the majority of them would be eliminated. Ignoring their protests, Rimmer immediately ordered everyone to start running. The children took off, with Buren and Runan leading the pack. Meanwhile, Raon lagged behind at the very back. Seeing this, many began to mock Raon, convinced he wouldn't be able to compete. However, to Rimmer, Raon was actually quite fascinating. He had the ability to see a person's potential through the color of their aura, yet strangely, he couldn't see any color from Raon, as if his potential was beyond comprehension. Meanwhile, Raon continued running tirelessly. To him, this kind of training was far too easy compared to what he had endured in his previous life. Raon's persistence started to confuse many onlookers, even Rimmer himself, who was surprised that Raon hadn't run out of stamina yet. Buren, observing Raon still running, decided to use his aura to increase his speed. However, Raon merely glanced at him with a blank expression, considering his actions childish. To him, they shouldn't be competing against each other, as the essence of this training was self-development, not just a race. Despite his growing fatigue, Raon kept running. Thanks to the progression of his Ring of Fire, he could replenish his stamina. The Wrath Spirit, noticing Raon's exhaustion, attempted to take over his body. Raon fought hard against the intrusion until, just before he was about to faint, the running selection concluded. Though it was extremely tough, his efforts paid off with an increase in his stats. Earlier, Rimmer had stated that children failing this test would be eliminated. However, it turned out to be a lie to test their perseverance. Nonetheless, Rimmer expected them to train earnestly. If not, he would genuinely eliminate those who slacked off. After providing this explanation, Rimmer immediately went to see Glenn to report on the training's progress. At the Zieghart training grounds, 3 children from collateral lines seemed displeased with Raon's success. One of them was Crane Zieghart. They accused Raon of using elixirs to boost his stamina and planned to teach him a lesson. Without any clear reason, they started bullying Raon. However, an annoyed Raon fought back until they were battered and unable to retaliate. At that moment, Raon asked them who had provoked them. Initially, he suspected Buren, but it turned out he had nothing to do with the incident. After uncovering the truth, Raon threatened the 3 children not to bother him again. Unbeknownst to them, Rimmer had been observing the incident from behind a tree. He was ready to intervene if the situation became dangerous, but what transpired surprised him. Raon reminded him of a young Glenn. Back at the dormitory, Raon conversed with the Wrath Spirit and made a bet. If Raon won, he would gain a +2 increase in stats and 1 random trait. However, if he lost, he would receive 10 rage points, making him more susceptible to being overtaken by the Wrath Spirit. Without hesitation, Raon accepted the bet, confident in his experience from his previous life. The next day in the afternoon after training, many children complained about the rigorous exercises. Raon, seeing them, remained indifferent and continued focusing on strengthening his body. Meanwhile, Renan was hiding behind a wall, secretly watching Raon as he trained. Raon, who was in the middle of training, was suddenly approached by Renan. Without hesitation, he asked her why she was there. Renan remained silent, not answering his question. Instead, she suddenly felt a refreshing scent and a calming atmosphere, which made her sit down next to him. From that moment on, Renan started following Raon wherever he went, even joining in on his training sessions. She felt her body become lighter whenever she inhaled Rayon's refreshing scent. Meanwhile, Rayon grew more uncomfortable with Runan's actions and asked her again if she had something to say to him. Runan simply replied, "No." So Rayon decided to ignore her, while Runan continued following him for a little while longer. Meanwhile, Burn silently observed the two of them, noticing how often they were together lately. The other kids also didn't like how close Rayon and Runan had become. Burn believed that Rayon's physical training was pointless. No matter how hard he tried, their abilities were simply on different levels. Instead of wasting time, Burn focused on improving his swordsmanship. He then urged the other kids to concentrate on their upcoming test, rather than paying attention to Raon and Runan. One day, while Raon and Runan were training, someone suddenly approached them. It was Dorian. He asked if he could join their training because he wanted to learn the proper way to build his physique. Without hesitation, Raon replied that he didn't mind at all. Dorian then offered Raon some cookies, but Raon refused. However, Runan kept staring at the cookies with a longing expression, as if she wanted them badly. Seeing this, Raon eventually handed the cookies to Runan, who immediately ate them. From then on, they continued their daily training routine, and 6 months quickly passed. Throughout these months, Raon trained tirelessly, putting his life on the line despite his poor condition. Time flew by, and soon the morning of the exam arrived. This time, the Guardians were also present to witness the event. Meanwhile, the Wrath Spirit reminded Raon about their previous bet. Of course, Raon hadn't forgotten. He remained confident since no one knew how things would turn out. On the other hand, Dorian was crouched on the ground, overwhelmed by nerves. Runan, however, casually offered Rayon a cookie. In the audience, Rayon's mother cheered for him with great excitement. She felt proud of how much he had grown over the past 6 months at the training grounds. Shortly after, the head of the family entered the exam arena to oversee the event personally. Without further delay, Rimmer announced the details of the exam. The challenge was to withstand the pressure he would unleash. The Guardians immediately voiced their objections, arguing that it was unfair. However, Rimmer explained that this pressure was formed through various achievements. It was proof of one's abilities, even without using aura. The head of the family then stepped in and stated that Rimmer wasn't wrong. He affirmed that a person could develop immense pressure based on how they trained. With that, the exam officially began. Runan was the first to take the test. Rimmer unleashed a level of pressure that a child who had followed all the training sessions should be able to endure. To pass, the participant had to move forward and touch Rimmer. Anyone who used aura to resist the pressure would be immediately disqualified. Runan stepped forward, enduring the crushing force. With determination, she slowly advanced until she finally managed to touch Rimmer. She had passed. Next was Dorian. He struggled immensely and even vomited afterward, but he too managed to succeed. Then came Byrne's turn. The pressure from Rimmer weighed down on him, making it incredibly difficult to move. However, he suddenly recalled his father's expectations. Byrne couldn't afford to fail. If he did, he might be discarded just like his older brother. Fueled by desperation, he pushed forward with all his might and eventually passed. Afterward, Rimmer gave Byrne some advice. He should stop trying to act like an adult and instead focus on training at a pace suitable for his age. Finally, the last participant to take the exam was Rayon. Unlike the others, Rimmer unleashed an even greater pressure on him. However, Rayon didn't waver in the slightest. As a regressor, he wasn't just Rayon Zeekart. Within him also existed the assassin Rayon. Because of that, such pressure was nothing to him. He slowly advanced, effortlessly pushing through the overwhelming force until he reached Rimmer. Then, with a calm expression, he asked if he had passed. Both Rimmer and the head of the family were stunned. They couldn't believe that Rayon had not only endured the pressure, but had completely broken through it. The audience too was left in shock, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Rimmer, losing his composure, immediately asked Rayon who he really was. Without hesitation, Rayon simply responded that Rimmer had seen his training over the past 6 months. However, Rimmer refused to accept that answer. He argued that Rayon's performance had far exceeded what could be achieved in just 6 months of training. He also added that the pressure he had used should have been impossible to break through. But then, realizing that they were still in the middle of an exam, Rimmer quickly changed the subject to lighten the mood. Without further delay, Rimmer officially announced Rayon as the best participant. Upon hearing this, Rayon's mother and her servant were overwhelmed with joy, even shedding tears of happiness. Meanwhile, the audience murmured in confusion, questioning how Rayon had managed to outperform everyone else. On the other hand, Byrne couldn't accept the result. He immediately protested, claiming that Rayon must have used some kind of trick. He also questioned how someone like Rayon, who carried a curse, could possibly be declared the best participant. Fueled by frustration, Byrne suggested settling the matter with a duel to determine who truly deserved the title. Rimmer then asked Byrne if he really wanted to be the top participant. Embarrassed, Byrne hesitated and said that wasn't the point. But since the exam was already over, he wanted a fair way to prove himself. Seeing this, Rimmer turned to the head of the family, asking for his decision. The head of the family then turned to Rayon and asked if he was willing to fight Byrne. Rayon firmly refused. The test was already over, and the results had been announced. There was no reason to duel Byrne. However, the head of the family then revealed a new incentive. The winner of the duel would receive a bronze tablet, which could be exchanged for a reward. The tablet system had 3 tiers: gold, silver, and bronze. each offering different prizes. More importantly, these tablets were awarded directly by the head of the family. Hearing this, Rayon reconsidered. The rewards seemed worthwhile, so he agreed to the duel. Thus, the bare-handed duel began. Burn charged forward, launching an attack at Rayon. However, Rayon effortlessly dodged and blocked his strikes. Frustrated, Burn then unleashed a technique called Void Tiger Fish, an advanced move passed down by his father. But even then, Rayon remained unfazed. He blocked every single one of Burn's attacks with ease. Meanwhile, Burn was fighting under immense mental pressure. He feared losing, knowing that failure could lead to being abandoned by his father. He had to prove himself. He had to win. On the other hand, Rayon could see through all of Burn's movements, reading every incoming strike. Then, at the perfect moment, Rayon intercepted Burn's punch with his own, not just blocking it, but replicating Burn's own technique. Burn took a direct hit. The audience gasped in shock. Rayon had copied Burn's technique on the spot. Dazed and in disbelief, Burn asked how Rayon could possibly use the same move as him. With a calm expression, Rayon simply replied, "I just copied it. After all, you showed it to me." The audience couldn't believe their eyes. What they had just witnessed was something they considered impossible. Rimmer, however, saw it differently. He believed that Rayon possessed a talent so extraordinary that it could place him at the very top of the continent. He decided to name this ability Heavenly Talent. Since Burn could no longer stand, Rimmer officially declared Rayon as the winner of the duel. Rayon's mother rushed into the arena, embracing him tightly. Overwhelmed with pride, she couldn't hold back her emotions. The same was true for Renan's parents, who watched with admiration. Meanwhile, Burn's father showed no such reaction. Instead, he coldly ignored Burn, feeling humiliated by his son's defeat. That night, in the Burn family's residence, Burn was summoned by his father and harshly scolded. Afterward, still filled with frustration, Burn wandered outside aimlessly. Before he knew it, he had arrived at the training hall. Unable to shake off his irritation, he stepped inside and checked the locker that Rayon had been using. What he saw shocked him. Inside, there was a pile of worn-out shoes, each pair a testament to countless hours of training. In that moment, Burn realized the truth. Rayon had been training relentlessly, while he himself had done the exact opposite. Confronted with the weight of his own inadequacy, Burn left the training hall in silence. Elsewhere, the Wrath Spirit was in disbelief. He had lost his bet with Raon and couldn't comprehend how it had happened. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. But Raon ignored him, focusing instead on what he had gained from their bet. +2 ability points, +1 random special trait, and +1 unique trait, Perception of the Snowflower. The Perception of the Snowflower trait enhanced his sensory range. However, since it was only at 1-star level, the effect was limited to a 10% increase. Rayon smirked and mocked the Wrath Spirit for giving such a ridiculous name to the trait. The next day, Renan was summoned by the head of the family. As promised, he was given the bronze tablet. With it, he had the right to request a reward, either an item or a favor, depending on the tablet's value. Without hesitation, Rayon immediately asked how he could restore his mother's status and return her to her former position. The head of the family answered, "The only way is to achieve something that earns the recognition of the entire family." But such an accomplishment was not easy. In fact, it was akin to plucking a star from the sky, nearly impossible. Yet, Rayon's response was unwavering. If the head of the family says it's possible, then it can be done. With that, Rayon considered the bronze tablet used and turned to leave. However, the head of the family stopped him. "That was just a question. You haven't actually claimed your reward yet. If all you wanted was an answer, I could have given it to you without using the bronze tablet." Without hesitation, Rayon made his real request, a cultivation technique far superior to the one taught in training. Rayon needed a more advanced technique. If he wanted to restore his mother's honor and exact his revenge, his current skills simply weren't enough. The head of the family snapped his fingers. At that moment, one of the Zekart family's bookshelves appeared before them. "Raise your hand," he instructed. "The book you desire the most will reveal itself to you." Rayon did as he was told. A single ancient book emerged. The head of the family and the servant beside him were stunned. How could it be that book? Before anyone could react, the contents of the book flowed directly into Rayon's mind and body. The head of the family stood still, lost in thought. He recalled his past, how he had focused solely on strengthening the family, neglecting his own son in the process. For the first time, regret filled his heart. Even if Rayon hated him, he had now made up his mind. He would protect Rayon and his mother, no matter what. Snapping out of his thoughts, he looked at Rayon and asked, "What just happened?" Rayon, still processing the new information, replied, "I don't know. I just remember a lost cultivation technique, and now it's inside me." The head of the family took a deep breath and asked, "What is the name of the book?" Rayon's eyes flickered as he spoke. "It's called 10,000 Flames Cultivation." Rayon was asked by the head of the family whether he truly remembered the contents of the 10,000 Flames Cultivation book. Without hesitation, Rayon confirmed that he did. The head of the family immediately sat down and said that was enough. Rayon was free to leave. After Rayon left, a servant asked the head of the family about the cultivation technique Rayon had mentioned. The head of the family explained that it was a technique that had only ever been used by the very first head of the Zekart family. He admitted that he never expected Raon to be able to learn it. The servant then asked about the book, which had gone missing. The head of the family reassured him, saying there was no need to worry. It had been passed down by someone else. Besides, no one else could use that cultivation technique. If not for Raon, the book would have just rotted away on the shelf. After returning home, Raon couldn't help but wonder why the head of the family had given him such a powerful cultivation technique. He felt that even a gold tablet wasn't enough to deserve such a reward. He tried using the technique, but no matter how hard he tried, he kept failing. Seeing Raon struggling, Wrath Spirit suddenly encouraged him to keep going. However, he also warned Raon to be extra careful while cultivating. If someone were to touch him during the process, it could cause serious problems, even paralysis. Raon immediately understood Wrath Spirit's real motive. He just wanted an excuse to disturb him while he was cultivating. Wrath Spirit even asked for permission to do it just once, but Raon firmly refused. Later, as Raon looked out the window, he spotted a servant by the lake. That servant wasn't just any ordinary servant. He was a spy, secretly gathering information on Raon. As soon as the spy let his report float away on the water, Raon swiftly pressed a knife against his neck. He ordered the servant to look at the lake and coldly stated that he had known about the spying ever since the servant first entered his residence. The servant was completely shocked. He had been so careful, yet Raon had seen through him all along. Without hesitation, Raon ordered him to open his mouth and forced a mysterious pill down his throat. Almost immediately, the servant felt a sharp pain in his stomach. Raon then picked up the report and demanded to know how it could be read. He took a few guesses and, to the servant's horror, got it right. The servant asked how Raon knew, but Raon ignored him and continued making guesses, this time about who the letter was intended for. Once again, he got it right. The servant panicked. He had spent years training as a spy, yet Raon seemed to know everything. As realization dawned, the servant suddenly suspected that the pill Raon had given him was Rageworm. Hearing this, Raon decided to play along and went along with the deception. The servant had assumed this mission would be an easy one, but he never expected to encounter someone like Raon. Desperate, the servant tried to negotiate, offering to rewrite the contents of the report, but Raon refused. He simply ordered the servant to write exactly what he had seen, though only the parts that his boss would inevitably find out anyway. Then, Raon made an unexpected offer. He asked the servant to become a double agent. With no other choice, the servant accepted. Satisfied, Raon walked away, hoping that the spy would provide valuable information when they met again. Not long after, training resumed. Despite everything, Raon still hadn't managed to use aura. When he arrived at the training grounds, he saw that only 42 people had made it through, barely a quarter of the original participants. Suddenly, Runan approached him. A few days ago, at the Runan estate, she had been told to always express gratitude to those who helped her, and so, without hesitation, she thanked Raon. Raon found the whole thing strange. It wasn't like Runan to act so suddenly. Then, Dorian came over and asked how Raon was doing. He was already struggling during the initial selection process, and now, as an official trainee, he felt like he was going to die for real. Dorian kept complaining about everything that had happened to him, even mentioning how Burn wasn't the top trainee, but to his shock, Burn was standing right behind him. Startled, Dorian froze, while Burn ignored him and walked straight up to Raon. Without hesitation, Burn apologized for his behavior during training. He admitted his defeat, but made it clear that he hadn't given up. No matter how much effort it took, he was determined to stand before Raon again. Burn had made up his mind. He would never back down or surrender. Raon found it odd that someone his age could openly acknowledge both his mistakes and his loss. Just then, Rimmer arrived and announced the details of their new training program. But before he could continue, someone suddenly appeared, drawing everyone's attention. It was a woman, Martha Zekart. Without wasting any time, Martha asked who the training leader was and told them to step forward. She declared that she couldn't stand the idea of being under someone weaker than her, and immediately challenged them to a fight. Raon stepped up and introduced himself as the top trainee. Martha scoffed, unimpressed. He didn't look like someone worthy of that title. Without hesitation, she challenged him to a fight. Burn immediately intervened. "Where's your pride, Martha?" he asked. Martha turned to him, furious that he had dared to speak to her that way. Burn remained calm, explaining that Raon had rightfully earned his position as the top trainee, but Martha dismissed his words with a sneer and mocked him instead. Despite her provocation, Burn didn't let his emotions get the better of him. Then, Runan appeared, stepping in to shield Raon from Martha. Martha turned and walked away, but it was just a feint. In an instant, she lunged at Raon, launching a sudden attack. However, Raon reacted swiftly, deflecting her strike with ease. Martha's eyes widened in shock. Her attack had been redirected. Without missing a beat, Raon counterattacked, but Martha managed to block his strike. Frustrated, Martha grew even angrier and prepared to attack again. But before she could, Rimmer stepped in and stopped her. "Raon hasn't learned to use aura yet," Rimmer stated. "I can't let you fight him, but once he does, I'll allow the battle to happen." Wrath Spirit fumed. He was frustrated that Raon had let Martha off so easily and urged him to retaliate with full force. But Raon remained calm. "Now's not the right time," he replied. "Besides, my strike landed. Next time I'll show her something even more impressive." The scene then shifted to the training grounds. Burin was struggling with the intense training, realizing that it wasn't as easy as he had expected. Meanwhile, Raon, despite only training for a month, had been improving at an astonishing rate. Martha, unwilling to be left behind, trained even harder. Known for her terrifying talent, she now found herself feeling uneasy. So much so that she couldn't even hide it from Raon. When she returned home, her anxious expression was obvious. A servant reassured her, saying there was no need to worry. Raon won't be able to defeat you, he said. He has a flaw that can't be overcome. Meanwhile, Raon continued training relentlessly. Having learned about Raon's weakness, Martha regained her confidence. Smirking, she began mocking him. The servant had informed her that Raon had incredibly low mana sensitivity and still hadn't learned aura, so she had nothing to be concerned about. Instead, she found it laughable. Runan, seeing Martha taunting Raon, immediately stepped in and drove her away. After the training session ended, Raon reflected on how enjoyable his training had been. Back when he was an assassin, the only thing he ever developed was his assassination skills. Wrath Spirit, on the other hand, was furious again. "You just stood there and let her insult you?" he raged. But before Raon could respond, Runan suddenly approached him. Without a word, she handed him something. Curious, Raon took a bite. The moment the food touched his tongue, both he and Wrath Spirit were stunned. It was delicious. They immediately wanted more. Runan, in her usual calm manner, simply stated, "It's marble ice cream," and then walked away without another word. Raon called out to Runan, hoping to get another taste of the food, but she ignored him and continued walking away. After a week of training, Raon finally returned home. As soon as he arrived, he received a report from the servant. He also asked about the current situation at his residence. The servant informed him that his boss's interest in Raon's mother had started to fade, and it seemed like the servant would soon be summoned back. The servant then asked if Raon was deliberately avoiding learning aura. Raon simply replied, "Who knows? Maybe." Hearing this, the servant left without another word. Wrath Spirit, still curious, questioned Raon about why he was struggling to grasp aura, but Raon himself wasn't sure. Despite his difficulties, he was determined to keep training, even though Wrath Spirit suggested that he should just get some rest instead. Raon opened his window, only to find Rimmer waiting outside. It turned out that Rimmer had come to give him guidance. Without explanation, Rimmer led Raon to a certain place, and Raon had no choice but to follow. As they climbed higher, Raon grumbled, wondering why they had to hike when Rimmer was supposed to be teaching him about attributes. From the moment Rimmer first saw Raon and witnessed his training methods, he couldn't shake the impression that Raon was like an intense fiery blaze, so strong that it resembled magma. Eventually, Rimmer stopped in the middle of the forest. Raon asked why they had halted there, but instead of answering, Rimmer unleashed his attribute, wind. He explained that, as an elf, he had been able to feel the wind ever since he was born. His lifelong desire was to wield a sword imbued with wind so powerful that it could cut through anything, and now he had finally achieved it. Rimmer urged Raon to find his own path and develop the fire he wanted to master. After that, they made their way to another location, arriving at the workshop of a craftsman. The craftsman eyed Raon suspiciously and asked Rimmer who he had brought along. Rimmer introduced Raon as the grandson of the family head, stating his name clearly, but the craftsman simply shrugged, saying he was already retired, unless, of course, the family head himself came to see him in person. However, Raon wasn't paying attention to the conversation. His focus was entirely on the fire he could feel in the workshop. He had seen many flames before, but this one was different. It was exactly the kind of fire he had been searching for. The craftsman finally introduced himself as Valkan. Hearing this, Raon was immediately taken aback. He knew that name well. Valkan was a world-renowned craftsman, famed for his extraordinary skill. Still in disbelief, Raon asked if he was truly the Valkan, the very man who had forged the sword wielded by the family head. When Valkan confirmed it, Raon quickly bowed out of respect. Rimmer, however, casually reintroduced Valkan to Raon, despite Raon already knowing exactly who he was. Then, Rimmer requested Valkan's help in igniting a fire so that Raon could experience it firsthand. Valkan, uninterested, simply told them to go to the blacksmith's forge instead. But then, Rimmer dropped an unexpected piece of information. Raon was Sylvia's son. Valkan's expression shifted in surprise. At that moment, Raon made a direct request. He asked Valkan to let him feel the flames. Valkan remained silent, staring at Raon for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. He explained that he was in the middle of crafting golden charcoal, a special material capable of producing flames far stronger than ordinary coal. He had dedicated the past 10 years solely to this project. Valkan made it clear that he didn't care about Raon. As long as Raon didn't interfere with his work, he had no objections. Raon bowed and expressed his gratitude. Meanwhile, Rimmer and Valkan stepped outside to chat, leaving Raon alone in the forge, completely immersed in the fire before him. Raon had spent 7 months trying to understand fire, sitting in front of the furnace owned by the blacksmith Valkan. All this time, he kept visualizing the kind of fire he wanted to create. Suddenly, Raon remembered his grudge against Darius. He also remembered his desire to reverse his mother's fate. That's why the fire he envisioned was like a torch, one that could light the path forward, a fire that could be used as a weapon to defeat beasts, snow, and rain. It had to be a fire that never died out. Then, a stronger energy than usual flowed into Rayon's body, forcing him to focus even harder to contain it. Just as he began to see the image in his mind clearly, the Wrath Spirit suddenly appeared inside his consciousness. Turns out, this was the moment the Wrath Spirit had been waiting for. It launched a direct attack on Rayon, making him feel like his body was shattering into pieces and leaving him gasping for air. Rayon desperately searched for a way to survive, but his consciousness started to fade. The Wrath Spirit mocked him, saying everything Rayon had done was pointless, and that his body and soul now belonged to him. But Rayon refused to give up. He fought back. He tried to absorb the natural mana heated by the furnace. The mana inside that furnace was far hotter and more powerful than ordinary fire, strong enough to devour everything. Seeing this, the Wrath Spirit began to panic and asked what Rayon was doing. Rayon answered, "I'm trying to survive." He was trying to directly absorb the surrounding energy. The fire in Valkan's furnace flared up dramatically, causing the blacksmith to turn toward Rayon in alarm. Strangely, despite the heat, Valkan felt a chill near Rayon. Concerned, he asked Rayon if he was okay, noticing that he was shivering intensely. Just then, Rimmer appeared and told the blacksmith to leave Rayon alone and not to touch him. At first, the blacksmith hesitated, but after Rimmer explained that Rayon was in a spiritual state where even the slightest touch could cause him to cough up blood or die instantly, Valkan asked whether the cold aura Rimmer mentioned was really inside Rayon's body, and if there was truly nothing they could do. Rimmer confirmed it was too dangerous to interfere and silently prayed that Rayon wouldn't die. Meanwhile, Rayon continued his struggle against the Wrath Spirit. The spirit told him to give up. There was no hope. But Rayon wouldn't surrender. He had died once before, powerless. This time, he was determined to make sure it wouldn't happen again. The fire in the furnace kept growing stronger, to the point that the furnace itself could no longer contain the sudden surge in heat. Rimmer realized that Rayon was absorbing mana directly from the furnace, as he sensed it gathering at a single point. Driven by determination, Rayon finally reached the flame he had been searching for. A massive explosion erupted from the furnace. Rimmer panicked and asked if Rayon was okay. To his relief, Rayon was still standing, now cloaked in golden flames. Having survived the ordeal, Rayon's stats increased after acquiring the 10,000 Flames technique. He felt confident that he could soon master it even further. Rayon was amazed at all the blessings he had just received. Meanwhile, the Wrath Spirit was left speechless, shocked by how mentally strong Rayon was, even after being pushed to the brink. Rayon calmly said, "I told you, trying to break me is pointless." From that point on, Rayon decided to stay alert and guard against the Wrath Spirit, working to cover any of his own weaknesses, so that the spirit couldn't exploit them again. Afterward, the blacksmith approached and asked if Rayon was all right. Rayon replied that he was fine. The blacksmith then asked if Rayon had successfully obtained an aura. Rayon confirmed that he had, and it was all thanks to the blacksmith. He also apologized for destroying the furnace during the process. The craftsman said it was no problem as long as Rayon was okay. Besides, he could always make another furnace. Then the craftsman glanced over at his furnace and felt something was off, so he went to check it out. To his surprise, there was golden charcoal inside. This charcoal was stronger than white charcoal and lasted longer than black charcoal. Thanks to Rayon, the craftsman had finally created the charcoal he had been dreaming of for decades. He thanked Rayon, but Rayon replied that he didn't do anything special. The craftsman then explained that while Rayon was training, the fire in the furnace always flared intensely, and that was because of Rayon's breath. The heat from the furnace had spread throughout the room, allowing the craftsman to finally produce the golden charcoal, all thanks to Rayon. After explaining this, he asked Rayon what his goal was and what kind of swordsman he wanted to become. With full confidence, Rayon answered that he wanted to become a swordsman who never gives up, no matter the situation or the opponent. The craftsman said he didn't expect such an answer from a kid like Rayon. He also told Rayon that he'd be able to get his sword in about 3 to 5 years. Once Rayon's resolve was fully set, the craftsman told him to come find him, because he would keep the golden charcoal just for Rayon. Rayon asked if that meant the craftsman would make a sword for him. Wasn't he already retired? The craftsman then said he would come out of retirement just to make Rayon's sword in the future. He also told Rayon to stay alive. Watching from above, Rimmer grew curious about what was going on. It turned out that Rayon had successfully awakened his aura. Rimmer commented that Rayon sure had a knack for making people worry. Apparently, the head of the family had been coming every day to check on Rayon, concerned about his progress. Now that Rayon had finally awakened his aura, the family could breathe a sigh of relief. The scene then shifts to the training ground. Runan was wondering when Rayon would return. She also wanted to repay him for helping her before. Moments later, Rayon appeared at the training hall entrance, and Runan immediately approached him. She encouraged Rayon and handed him a marble ice cream, the same kind she had given him before. Runan noticed that Rayon's aura now carried a colder, fresher, and stronger energy than before. Rayon thanked her and took a bite of the ice cream. The Wrath Spirit was thrilled. It tasted amazing, and it had been ages since he last had one. He begged Rayon to eat the rest, but Rayon told Runan he'd only have one. Runan then asked if Rayon was feeling better. He smiled and said he was. The next day, Rimmer gathered everyone and announced a special plan for the upcoming month. In 1 month, he would be holding one-on-one duels. The outcome of these battles would affect each student's graduation and determine their rankings. Martha then raised her hand and asked what would happen to students who had fallen behind and hadn't awakened their aura yet. Rimmer casually replied that every student had already awakened their aura. Martha was a bit shocked and asked when that happened. Rimmer responded that it was probably yesterday or today. He wasn't exactly sure. Martha immediately realized he was talking about Rayon, as she turned to him and said that now she finally had the chance to fight him. She'd been dying of boredom from waiting too long. Martha then began provoking Rayon, but he stayed silent, unfazed by her taunts. Burin arrived to stop her, but instead of backing down, Martha doubled down, comparing Rayon to Burin and the other trainees. She then told Rayon that he had been at the top for too long, and now it was time for him to give up that position. Martha proposed a wager. Whoever won their duel would take the top trainee spot. But Rayon refused. There was nothing in it for him if all he did was risk his title. Hearing that made Martha laugh. She said Rayon didn't understand his situation. He had no one backing him up. Rayon responded by asking if she was scared. That only made Martha laugh harder, and she changed the terms of the bet. If Rayon won, she would give him the 9 Flowers Elixir, a rare potion known to enhance both physical and mental strength. Finally, Rayon agreed to the wager. A month passed, and it was time for Martha to seek her revenge. That duel would be her first rematch since the day she lost, her first ever defeat. The one-on-one sparring event was about to begin. Rimmer told the trainees to watch the fights carefully and think about how they'd handle similar situations. The first match was Burin versus Dorian. Before the match began, Dorian raised his hand. He wanted to forfeit due to not feeling well, but Rimmer told him to at least give it a shot. There was always something to learn, even in defeat. The match started, and Burin quickly secured an easy win. The next fight was Renan versus Crane. As soon as it began, Crane rushed forward to attack, but Renan blocked his strikes flawlessly, knocking his sword from his hands and winning the match with ease. Several other matches followed, and then it was time for the final fight. Rayon versus Martha. Their battle was intense. Martha launched a relentless offense while Rayon skillfully defended and counterattacked. Eventually, Martha unleashed her aura and resumed her assault. But Rayon still held his ground, then struck back. Then came Rayon's turn to release his aura. Martha was stunned. The flames weren't ordinary. She could sense they were dangerous. Realizing that, Martha got serious. They clashed once again, exchanging blows at full force. Their swords collided with such power that the ground cracked beneath them and strong winds burst out, blinding the spectators. Once the dust settled, everyone could see it. Martha had lost, her sword shattered. No one could believe it. Rayon, who had only awakened his aura a month ago, had defeated Martha so completely. We then shift to the family head's residence. Rimmer reported to the head that Rayon had beaten Martha. Even Rimmer was stunned. Martha had been training her aura for 4 years, yet she still lost so decisively to Rayon. The family head told Rimmer to guide Rayon carefully so he wouldn't grow overconfident. He then asked about Martha's condition. Rimmer said she was in shock, though her physical wounds were fully treated. But the real issue was psychological. This was her first official loss, and the emotional blow was deep. Next, we see Rayon planting flowers. Wrath Spirit was grumbling, telling him to do it properly. That night, after Rayon defeated Martha, his stats had increased once again. His Ring of Fire had reached 4 stars, and his water resistance had improved as well. Just as Rayon finished planning, Martha showed up. Rayon immediately asked what she wanted. Martha had come to challenge him again. Rayon called her pathetic for not accepting her loss. But Martha said it wasn't that. She just couldn't understand why she lost. Rayon then demanded the item she owed him from their previous bet. Since Rayon refused her new challenge, Martha threatened to stomp on the flowers in his yard, saying she never expected Rayon to be into gardening. Rayon replied that he didn't actually like flowers. He was doing it for his mother. After that, Martha was about to head home, but suddenly Rayon's mother appeared and asked who the friend with him was. She immediately recognized Martha because of her black hair and black eyes. Rayon's mother seemed worried, likely because she had heard about their recent duel. She asked Martha why she had come. Martha replied that she just wanted to say something to Rayon, and now that it was done, she was planning to leave. But Rayon's mother gently grabbed Martha's hand and invited her to come inside for a meal. At first, Martha tried to refuse, but Rayon's mother insisted, leaving Martha with no choice but to agree. Rayon's mother prepared a delicious meal and began chatting with her during dinner. As Martha watched her, memories of her own mother came flooding back. After finishing the meal, Martha quietly left the house. On her way back, she kept thinking about how Rayon's mother reminded her of her own, and that was why she couldn't bring herself to turn down the invitation. Ever since her mother was kidnapped, Martha had promised herself never to lose again, not until she could reunite with her. But now she had lost to Rayon, and feared she might be cast out of her family. However, when she arrived home, she was surprised to receive a letter from her father. In it, he congratulated her on her first defeat and informed her that he was still searching for her mother. Martha went to her room, picked up a knife, and cut her hair short. She vowed to become stronger, to start over from scratch, and to finally let go of the pain from her past. The trainees suddenly noticed something strange about Martha. She wasn't acting like her usual self, and on top of that, she had even cut her hair. Martha then approached Rayon. She told him that she intended to keep the promise they had made before, that the loser would have to follow the winner's orders. After saying that, Martha left, leaving Rayon surprised that she was actually willing to listen to him. However, this change in Martha's attitude only applied to Rayon, the one who had defeated her. The new year arrived. Although only small changes had occurred, no one expected Martha to continue obeying Rayon even after the year turned. After that, Byrne became calmer and took on more responsibility as the coordinator of the trainees. Meanwhile, Renan's sword became sharper and more refined. As for Rayon, he continued risking his life through intense training every day. It had become a part of his routine. Soon, the trainees began to feel even more astonished by Rayon. He had managed to master a newly taught technique in less than half a day. Rimmer later reported Rayon's achievement to the head of the family. In response, the head of the family informed Rimmer that they would soon be receiving important guests, a delegation from the Owen Kingdom set to arrive in just a few days. The Owen Kingdom was one of the 6 major kingdoms located in the heart of the continent. They were one of Sieghart's key allies and a kingdom that placed great value on the sword and martial arts. Hearing this, Rimmer immediately asked who would be leading the delegation. The head of the family explained that while Duke Tartan was the official representative, the third prince would also be attending. Since the third prince was close in age to Rayon and the trainees, the head of the family instructed Rimmer to properly train the trainees in preparation. Rimmer asked if the delegation would actually visit their training ground. The head of the family confirmed it, saying that the guests specifically requested to observe the swordsman and trainees in action, meaning there could be no embarrassing performances. Hearing that, Rimmer began plotting something. Returning to the training grounds, Rimmer announced to the trainees that they would soon be facing off against the prospective knights of the Owen Kingdom. It turned out that Rimmer had personally visited the prince and invited him to their training ground, rather than letting him visit the other training centers. Rimmer confidently declared that he would show the prince what real swordsmen looked like. Not long after, the knights of the Owen Kingdom arrived, with the prince naturally becoming the center of attention. The prince introduced himself as Greer de Owen. Rayon immediately sensed that the prince was strong, unusually so for someone of his age. Among all the knights, Greer stood out the most. Rimmer then asked Rayon if he wanted to fight the prince. Without hesitation, Rayon answered flatly that he did. Rayon also thought it was the perfect opportunity to put his newly learned technique to the test. Since Rayon agreed to fight, the others had no choice but to follow suit, and thus a series of 20 matches was arranged. Rimmer instructed everyone to follow Rayon's lead in choosing who would fight, and even revealed that he had placed a personal bet with the Owen Kingdom. His entire month's salary was on the line. He threatened the trainees, telling them not to lose. Rayon then finished selecting the participants and ordered them to gather information on their opponents before the matches began. Rayon also offered a few words of motivation to the other trainees as the leader of their group. He believed the first match would be crucial for boosting everyone's morale, so he chose Martha to fight first. Martha agreed without hesitation and immediately stepped into the dueling arena. Her opponent was a man much taller than she was. He introduced himself as Tars. Despite the clear difference in size, Martha remained confident that she would win. The duel between Martha and Tars began. Watching from the sidelines, the prince thought to himself that Rayon's training ground was full of talented individuals, unlike the other training camps he had seen. Meanwhile, the Duke asked Rimmer if the reason he had invited them here was to show off his students. Rimmer responded that this was a rare opportunity for the trainees to face knights from one of the 6 great kingdoms, and he believed it would be a valuable learning experience. Then, Rimmer casually suggested that they place a bet and reward the winners. However, the Duke seemed to look down on Rimmer's trainees and asked if they even stood a chance against the knights of the Owen Kingdom. Rimmer simply replied that he believed in the students he had trained. Returning to the duel, Martha kept attacking relentlessly until Tars's sword finally broke. Tars couldn't believe how strong Martha was. With one final strike, Martha sealed her victory. Rayon, observing from the side, was surprised. Instead of becoming softer after their previous battle, Martha's swordsmanship had grown faster and stronger. The matches continued until the 18th duel, where Runan faced off against Idalia. Idalia openly said that she didn't like Runan's blank expression and immediately unleashed her aura. Runan calmly replied that she didn't like fire, and then released her own aura. Their duel began, and their clash created a mist that spread across the arena. Runan used the mist to move stealthily. Idalia sensed Runan's presence and tried to strike, but there was nothing there, leading her to wonder if it had all been an illusion. Suddenly, Runan appeared behind her, sword pointed at her back, and claimed victory in the 18th match. Idalia admitted it had been a great fight, but Runan ignored her and instead walked straight to Raun, asking if he had been watching her duel. Raun replied that her footwork had improved significantly compared to before. Runan thanked him and quietly sat down next to him. Next was the 19th duel, featuring Byrne against Saren. After briefly introducing themselves, they immediately launched into battle. Byrne quickly realized that their skills were very close, meaning that even a slight lapse could cost him the match. The fight was fierce and intense, and eventually both of their swords shattered, resulting in a draw. Byrne stepped down from the arena, frustrated that he couldn't win. However, Rayon encouraged him, saying he had done a good job and not to worry, because Rayon would win the final match and uphold Sieghart's honor. Rayon then entered the arena alongside the prince. The prince quickly sensed that Raon's martial arts skills seemed ordinary and asked Raon if he was a direct descendant of the Zeekart family. Raon answered honestly, he was not. Hearing that, the prince completely underestimated Raon, losing interest in the fight. He didn't like predictable matches and was far more eager to fight Martha, Runan, or Burin instead. The prince even suggested to Rimmer that after he defeated Raon, he should be allowed to challenge either Martha or Runan. Rimmer simply smiled and said it was fine, as long as he won. The arrogant prince then ordered Martha and Runan to prepare, boasting that he would quickly finish his duel with Raon. He also mentioned he wouldn't even bother using his aura to conserve his strength. Meanwhile, the Duke asked Rimmer who that monster was, referring to Raon, because he had barely been able to sense Raon's presence. Rimmer smiled and said, "So you noticed," and added that maybe the Duke should have warned the prince, who was clearly underestimating Raon. The Duke explained that the prince was destined to one day lead the Owen Kingdom and had never experienced defeat before. He believed that this would be a perfect opportunity to teach the prince about losing in a safe environment. Even so, he emphasized, the prince was strong. Even genius swordsmen couldn't defeat him. Rimmer disagreed with that statement and proposed another bet. Whoever lost would treat the other to a drink. The bet was simple. Raon would win within 5 strikes or less. The duel began. Raon immediately closed the distance and attacked. With just a single strike, Raon defeated the prince, leaving the Duke in utter shock. It didn't even take 5 strikes. Raon crushed the arrogant prince in one clean blow. At that moment, the prince realized there was a reason Raon had been saved for the final match. He finally understood. Raon wasn't just talented. He was a true genius. The Duke turned to Rimmer and said, amazed, "He's still just a trainee. How are his footwork and swordsmanship already so perfect?" Rimmer smiled and replied, "That's why I told you, Raon would win." As Raon prepared to leave the arena, the prince called out, insisting that it wasn't over yet. He argued that he hadn't shown his true skills, that if he had fought seriously from the beginning, he could have won. At that moment, Martha interrupted, bluntly telling the prince to accept his loss instead of whining like a spoiled dog. She added that she had tried to be polite, but since he had lost, he should just leave quietly. Delia quickly scolded Martha, telling her to be more respectful toward the prince. But Martha fired back, saying, "He's royalty, and I'm a direct descendant of the Zeekart family. Why should I show him any special respect?" Before the argument could escalate further, Rimmer stepped in to calm everyone down and said they should first hear what Raon had to say. Raon spoke clearly. "There's no reason to continue. The duel is over, and the bet has been decided." Hearing that, the prince finally shouted out that he accepted his defeat and admitted he had misjudged and underestimated Raon. He also confessed that he felt ashamed, but pleaded for one more duel, a serious one, so he wouldn't regret it for the rest of his life. The prince even bowed his head and earnestly begged Raon for another match. Raon hadn't expected the prince to apologize so sincerely. He had thought the prince was nothing more than an arrogant noble. Moved by the prince's humility, Raon agreed to a rematch. One final time. The second duel began. This time, the prince fought with everything he had. And Raon too finally revealed more of his true power. The prince launched the first attack, unleashing a flurry of strikes. Yet Raon calmly defended against every blow without giving an inch. The prince then prepared to unleash a secret technique passed down only to the successors of the Owen royal family. Raon stood ready to receive the attack and encouraged the prince to come at him. He activated the Ring of Fire to strengthen his defense, surprising the prince with the appearance of a golden flame aura. The prince charged forward, and the clash of their swords echoed through the arena. For a moment, it seemed the prince had the upper hand. He managed to push through Raon's aura and saw an opening. But in the next instant, the prince's sword shattered. Raon immediately counterattacked, landing a decisive blow and securing victory once again. Thus, the second duel also ended in Raon's overwhelming win. The prince then thanked Raon and reached out for a handshake, grateful for everything he had learned. He openly admitted his defeat. Raon shook his hand and replied that he too had learned a lot from their duel. The prince asked Raon how old he was, and Raon answered that he was 14. Realizing he had lost to someone younger than himself, the prince smiled bitterly. Then, he handed Raon a special token, a symbol that Greer de Owen, the third prince of the Owen Kingdom, would grant any request made by the bearer. Raon asked why he was being given such a valuable item. The prince explained that, even though he lost, he felt relieved. He had realized something far more important through their fight. With that, the prince turned and left, and Raon also took his leave. Later, the prince reported everything that had happened to the head of the Owen household. He told him he wished to return immediately to put into practice everything he had learned. On the way back, the Duke asked why the prince had revealed the Owen royal family's secret technique. The Duke thought it was excessive and something that should have been kept hidden. The prince agreed that he had gone too far, but the Duke wasn't done. He pointed out that the prince had also handed over a royal relic to Raon. The prince explained that it was simply a token of gratitude for Raon agreeing to a rematch. Besides, Raon had shown techniques worth paying attention to. The prince saw the relic as an investment, believing that Raon might one day become the strongest in the kingdom. The prince hoped to build a friendship with him, and couldn't help but wonder just how powerful Raon would become the next time they met. Meanwhile, back at the training grounds, the other trainees congratulated Raon on his overwhelming victory. Among them, the head of the Zeekhart household's butler looked on happily, proud to see his grandson recognized by a foreign prince. He rarely saw the head of the household smile, and even less often with such warmth. The head, however, brushed it off, muttering that the old butler must be imagining things. At the same time, the Duke of Owen had delivered some serious news to the Zeekhart household. It seemed the 5 demons had started to move. The scene shifted back to the training grounds. Rimmer gathered the trainees and praised them for their efforts. He then announced that next week, they would undergo special training, real combat practice. He warned them to be prepared to shed blood. Apparently, in the southern region of Zeekhart, a group of mountain bandits calling themselves the Snow Tiger Claw had been causing trouble. Originally, they survived by collecting taxes from travelers passing through the mountains, but recently, they had grown more violent, stealing from merchants and even killing civilians. The trainees' original mission had been to wipe them out. However, it had now changed. They were tasked with tracking down the bandits and eliminating them because the group had attacked a village, slaughtered its people, and burned it to the ground. Rimmer warned everyone not to let their guard down. These bandits were once well-known aura users. Their departure to the southern region was set for tomorrow afternoon. After the meeting, Runan stayed behind to continue training for the upcoming mission. But no matter how hard she tried, she felt she wasn't making any progress. She thought about asking Raon for advice, but decided against it, not wanting to bother him. After finishing her practice, Runan headed home. On the way, someone called out to her. It was her older brother, Syria. The moment she heard his voice, Runan froze, visibly terrified. She couldn't even speak in front of him. Syria told her bluntly that she was forbidden from participating in any battles or dangerous duels. Hearing those words made Runan stumble backward, trembling. It turned out that Runan had a deep trauma from her past. When she was little, she had seen Syria kill her beloved pet squirrel right in front of her. Now, he repeated the same act in front of her, bringing those painful memories flooding back. Runan's trauma resurfaced violently. Syria leaned in close and whispered that she must not risk her life before the selection day, because in his eyes, Runan belonged to him. At that moment, Raon arrived, stepping in to protect the terrified Runan. He stood between them and demanded to know who Syria was. Raon asked the man in front of him who he was. The man replied that Raon should introduce himself first before asking about others. Raon responded that the man had no right to block someone's way in a narrow alley. He even suspected the man might be a thief or a robber. The man chuckled and said Raon could think whatever he liked, but he wasn't some criminal. He was actually Runan's older brother. Still unsure, Raon asked if he was really Runan's brother, since Runan looked so scared. The man admitted it had been a long time since they last met, and perhaps he had overstepped and frightened her. Raon then pointed out that Runan's brother had killed a squirrel with his bare hands. How could he treat that like a joke? Runan's brother explained that the squirrel was just a toy, and even showed his hands to prove there was nothing wrong. But Raon suspected he had simply wiped away any traces of blood using aura. Runan's brother went on, saying he had only come to give his little sister some snacks. He also complimented Runan on picking good friends and hoped they would stay close in the future. With that, he apologized for his behavior and left. As it turned out, Raon already knew who Runan's brother was. He was a genius swordsman, one of the 12 future stars of the continent. He came from the Sulian family, and his name was Syria Sulian, also known as the Azure Sword. Before Raon's regression, he had only heard Syria's name. This was the first time they actually met. Raon wondered silently whether Syria was just cruel or merely pretending to be a hero, because he reminded Raon of Darius. Afterward, Raon reached out his hand to help Runan to her feet, offering to escort her. When they arrived at the carriage, Runan thanked Raon for accompanying her. Raon told her to get plenty of rest, as they would be leaving the next day. Back home, Runan became even more withdrawn. Her brother's return had brought back painful memories. Syria had always acted this way, believing it was the best way to protect Runan from getting hurt. When she was young, Runan was injured by her pet squirrel. In response, Syria killed the squirrel. Later, whenever Runan spoke about it to others, those people would end up getting hurt too. Because of that, Runan chose to stay silent, believing it was the only way to avoid anyone else getting hurt. At first, she thought she was the only one suffering and alone, but after meeting Raon, she realized they were quite alike. Watching how hard Raon worked to change how others saw him, Runan began to believe she could change too. They were both trying to transform themselves, but right now, Runan felt that change was impossible for her, and decided that maybe it was okay if she stayed the same. For now, she just had to endure. The next day, the trainees and Rimmer arrived in the southern region. Rimmer told the group to rest first before starting their mission. Meanwhile, Raon thanked the Wrath Spirit. If it weren't for him, Raon wouldn't have noticed Runan's brother hiding his presence, and he wouldn't have made it in time to help Runan that night. The Wrath Spirit then urged Raon to give him control of his body so he could take revenge on Runan's brother. He even promised to return Raon's body once he was done, all because Runan had given him his new favorite treat, marble ice cream. Of course, Raon refused, even though the Wrath Spirit seemed serious about it. Raon explained that killing Runan's brother would be pointless. The damage had already been done. No matter what happened to her brother now, it wouldn't erase the trauma Runan had suffered. Runan was the first person who genuinely cared for Raon, and because of that, Raon made a silent vow. He would personally destroy anyone who ever hurt Runan, whether in this life or the one before. 2 days passed since they arrived in the southern region. Eventually, they reached a village that had been attacked by the Snow Tiger Claw group. There were charred corpses of villagers everywhere. Martha didn't flinch. She was already used to scenes like this. Raon, however, looked around, wondering where Runan was. He hadn't seen her. It turned out Runan had wandered into one of the villagers' homes and stumbled upon a corpse. The sight overwhelmed her, and she fought the urge to vomit. Rimmer gathered all the trainees and explained that everything they had just witnessed was the work of the Snow Tiger group. He told them to burn this sight into their hearts and never forget it, so that when they faced Snow Tiger, they wouldn't hesitate for even a second. Rimmer then handed out special whistles. Normal people wouldn't be able to hear the sound. Only those with trained senses could. If anyone found themselves in danger, they were to blow the whistle immediately, and Rimmer would come running. However, he also warned them. Snow Tiger's swords showed no mercy. So, rather than relying solely on the whistle, they should try to handle the situation themselves first. Afterward, the trainees were ordered to form groups. Meanwhile, Runan was still haunted by her brother's words, how he had promised to kill anyone who dared hurt her. As she stood there lost in thought, Raon approached and asked if she wanted to team up. Runan agreed, and they set off together. As they moved, Raon began analyzing the possible whereabouts of the Snow Tiger group. Following his instincts, he led Runan toward a nearby hill. The Wrath Spirit reappeared, teasing Raon about how much he seemed to worry about Runan. Yet, he never actually talked to her about it. Raon admitted he didn't know what to say. After all, he wasn't even sure how he felt about his own mother. How could he possibly give advice to someone else about family matters? The only thing Raon was certain of was how terribly Runan's brother had treated her. At the top of the hill, they discovered a hidden forest, just as Raon had predicted. The enemy's tracks had been carefully concealed, enough to fool the average person, but not Raon. His experience as an assassin before his regression made him far more perceptive. Raon told Runan that they were close to the enemy's base. From now on, she needed to stay completely silent and just follow his lead. The path itself was clear of traps, except for one at the entrance to the enemy's base. Peeking into the camp, they spotted the Snow Tiger members, along with a hostage, a young child. Raon carefully assessed the situation. His decision was clear. They had to save the child. He asked Runan to help by using her mana to muffle any sounds during the rescue. Runan stepped forward and activated her mana, creating a sound barrier. Meanwhile, Raon rushed in and swiftly took down the two bandits in front of him. But when Runan saw the bandits killed, her trauma resurfaced. She dropped to her knees, screaming, and the mana she was using to suppress sound shattered. Frozen by fear, Runan became an easy target. One of the bandits moved in to strike her, but Raon quickly intervened, saving her just in time. He subdued the bandit and demanded answers. Resigned to his fate, the bandit spilled everything he knew. It turned out there was another hostage inside the cave, the sibling of the child Raon had just rescued. Hearing this, Runan declared that she would save the other hostage, telling the child not to worry. But Raon warned her, "It's not that easy. Don't make promises you can't keep." Right after, Runan blew the special whistle Rimmer had given them. However, the sound was picked up by someone inside the cave, and more enemies emerged. Without hesitation, Raon threatened the new group, offering a trade. "Release the hostage, or your men die." The enemy leader just laughed and threatened to kill the young girl instead. Seeing the situation escalate, Raon quietly told Runan to turn away. Then, without mercy, he struck down the bandit holding the girl hostage and launched an attack on the rest. Runan quickly joined in, using her abilities to disrupt the enemy's senses. Together, they managed to rescue both hostages and retreat from the immediate danger. Afterward, Raon instructed Runan to stay and protect the children while he finished off the remaining bandits. But Runan grabbed his arm, pleading with him not to go, worried because Raon was still injured. Raon calmly explained, "Yes, the battlefield is terrifying, but what's even more terrifying is being paralyzed by fear and unable to act. We are swordsmen of the Zekart family. It's our duty to carry on the legacy of those who came before us and protect those who remain." He continued, "I don't know exactly what your brother did to you, but the more you let fear control you, the larger that shadow grows. You can't spend your whole life running from it. Only you can protect yourself and the people you love." Raon then added, "From now on, your choices are your own. You don't have to hide in the shadows anymore." Moved by Raon's words, Runan gathered her courage. She refused to stay shackled by her past any longer. Meanwhile, Raon returned to the fight, cutting down many of the remaining bandits. Suddenly, the bandit leader attacked him. Raon narrowly dodged and countered with a powerful strike, killing him instantly. The other bandits stared in shock, wondering how a kid could be this strong. Just as Raon was about to declare the battle over, he was ambushed again. It turned out the one he had killed wasn't the real leader. The true leader now revealed himself. Unlike the others, he was a skilled swordsman, forcing Raon into a tougher fight. At the same time, Runan was being cornered by another group of bandits. Raon's focus wavered, worried for her safety. Runan, still haunted by her brother's shadow, froze. But then she heard Rayon shout to her, "You can protect them! Don't be afraid!" Those words broke through her fear. Runan gathered her strength and defeated the bandits threatening her. With Runan safe, Rayon could finally focus. He unleashed his aura and used a devastating technique, completely overwhelming the real bandit leader. With the battle over, Rayon checked the bandits' loot, and among the treasures he found a rare elixir, the two-tone flower. Suddenly a man appeared and asked if they were the ones who had killed the bandits. Rayon calmly answered, "Yes, we did. Why do you ask?" The man introduced himself as Rictor. Hearing that name triggered Rayon's memory. He remembered Rictor as a renowned martial artist, known for his extraordinary skills. Rictor was famous for joining the North and South Alliance using only his sword, and for leading a large group of bandits in the mountains for over a decade. Rictor then guessed that Raon and Runan were Zighart trainees, noting the lack of a family crest on their swords. He began to consider whether he should kill them. As he unleashed his killing intent, Rayon, who had once lived as an assassin, remained unfazed. Even though Rayon knew he couldn't defeat Rictor with his current skills, for some reason, he felt no urge to back down. Drawing his sword, Rayon stood his ground and challenged Richter to attack. Rayon knew that if Richter unsheathed his blade, it would likely mean death. But he wasn't afraid to die. Seeing Rayon's fearless stance, Richter decided he had no desire to fight him. He said he would regret killing someone like Rayon now. Richter added that even if he were to seize the elixir Rayon carried, he would end up dead anyway, because the fierce wind that had been watching them would not let him leave alive. With that, Richter turned to leave, asking Rayon for his name before going. He said he would wait for the day he would hear Rayon's name echo across the mountains, Terukan, and the Reborn River. Afterward, Rayon and Runan returned to the children and safely made their way back to Martha village. Burin was once again frustrated that he had fallen behind Rayon. Meanwhile, Rimmer was busy giving advice to the other trainees. After their mission, Rayon and Runan were summoned by the family head. Both were awarded bronze medals for their achievements. The family head even praised them, and much to Rayon's surprise, he returned the elixir Rayon had obtained during the mission. After the ceremony, Rayon went home, where he found Dorian waiting for him. Rayon immediately panicked. Dorian had already told his mother everything. Soon, Rayon's mother appeared and asked him if what she heard was true. Rayon was speechless. She walked up to him, pulled him into a tight hug, and said, "You did a great job, Rayon." Rayon was stunned. He had expected her to scold him, since she had always warned him to be careful. But instead, his mother explained, "The first head of the family swung his sword to protect the weak. Why would I scold you for doing the same? For saving those hostages?" In fact, she was proud of him. Rayon, unfamiliar with such overwhelming emotions, struggled to process it all. When he turned around, he realized Dorian had already slipped away. The Wrath Spirit appeared, teasing, "Finally noticed, huh? That kid ran off a long time ago." That night, Rayon thought to himself, this wasn't such a bad night after all. Meanwhile, Runan had gained newfound confidence, successfully overcoming her trauma thanks to Rayon's words during their mission. And as it turned out, Rimmer had been secretly observing Rayon's encounter with Richter the whole time. The fierce wind Richter spoke of, it was Rimmer himself watching over them. After everything that happened during the mission, Rimmer began to believe that Rayon resembled the first head of the Zighart family and considered him a promising seed for a future king. Meanwhile, at the Robert family residence, Darius was busy writing something. He glanced down at a wound on his hand, a wound that still hadn't healed. It was the same wound he had received from Rayon, the assassin, 17 years ago. Despite using countless elixirs, consulting expert doctors, and even renowned priests, nothing had been able to heal it. The wound neither festered nor closed. Instead, it remained, as if forcing Darius to constantly remember his true self. Darius wondered if the spirits of the dead were compelling him to remember them. But unfortunately, Darius was not the type to dwell on the past. He simply didn't have time to waste before realizing his ambitions. Elsewhere, Rayon had achieved the rank of sword expert. His stats had risen along with his advancement. Reaching this level hadn't been easy. He had fought tooth and nail for it. The Wrath Spirit emerged and sneered, saying that even sword masters were nothing but insects to him, let alone mere sword experts. So, Rayon shouldn't be so proud. Rayon replied that becoming a sword expert at just 15 years old was incredibly rare, and it would be hard to find anyone else like him across the continent. The Wrath Spirit scoffed, saying only fools cared about age on the battlefield. Weakness was weakness, no matter how old you were. Rayon agreed, admitting that no one would show mercy just because he was young. The Wrath Spirit added that even now, Rayon's strength was no match for just one of his claws, but hearing that made Rayon chuckle. In the past, the Wrath Spirit wouldn't even have bothered mentioning something like a claw. To Rayon, this was a small acknowledgement of his growth, even if the Wrath Spirit angrily denied it. Rayon teased him, saying it was obvious the spirit had recognized his progress. Infuriated, the Wrath Spirit insisted he would never acknowledge a mere human, but Rayon continued to poke fun at him. The scene then shifts to the training ground. Rimmer called out to everyone, telling them to stop for the day. Their training was over. Burin protested, asking for an extra 20 minutes to make up for Rimmer's tardiness, but Rimmer ignored him and immediately ran off. Rayon took over, instructing everyone to finish up their exercises and asking the assigned team to start cleaning the training hall. Meanwhile, Dorian was opening his locker when he suddenly screamed. Martha was standing right next to him. She ordered the others to clear out, saying she would handle the cleaning herself. Just then, Rimmer returned, remembering something he had forgotten to announce. He informed them that they had received their second mission. It had been 6 months since their first mission, and this time, they were being sent to Cebu Village, in the southeastern territory of Zeekhart, to eliminate the orcs threatening the villagers. In short, it was an orc subjugation mission. Everyone was excited. They had been waiting for a mission like this. However, Rimmer revealed that he wouldn't be accompanying them. Byrne asked what they should do if they encountered serious danger. Rimmer simply said that dealing with such situations was part of the test. Even knowing when to retreat and survive was a skill, and the leader's judgment would be critical. He added that they would depart in 2 days at dawn. The announcement stunned everyone. Only 2 days to prepare. Rimmer explained that an extermination mission required much more urgency and focus compared to escort or dungeon exploration missions, so they had to be ready. Byrne complained about the lack of preparation time, but Rayon immediately stepped up, calming everyone by reminding them that missions could come at any time, without warning. Now wasn't the time to panic. It was time to prepare. Hearing Rayon's words helped steady the others' nerves. Meanwhile, Rimmer gave one final warning. Orcs were far more savage and powerful. Even their sheer size alone was unlike any monster they had faced before. He advised them to focus on dodging, rather than trying to endure hits, because facing orcs head-on would be far too dangerous for them right now. Especially since they would be outnumbered, the battles would be chaotic and overwhelming. The next day, Rayon was getting ready to set out on his mission. The Wrath Spirit warned him that unexpected things could happen at any time, so Rayon shouldn't assume everything would go according to plan. Just then, Rayon's mother suddenly entered his room, surprising him. She looked upset, furious even, because Rayon hadn't informed her beforehand. Rayon asked how she had found out. He figured it must have been Dorian who told her, but it turned out it was Rimmer who had informed her. Rayon quickly apologized. His mother then told him that being the top member wasn't just about receiving honors, it was a position of responsibility. He had to lead the others in a better direction. It wasn't enough to simply complete the mission. He had to guide his teammates and minimize any losses. The lives of the others would depend on Rayon's decisions. She reminded him that while subjugating monsters might sound easy, it was actually a difficult mission. They had to completely eliminate the enemy to ensure no villagers would be harmed. She warned Rayon to always remember, he wasn't just a trainee anymore. He was a swordsman of Zeekhart. Rayon thought his mother might scold him, and she truly was angry, but she held it back, knowing this wasn't the right time for it. Even though she was deeply worried for him, departure time arrived. Rimmer addressed everyone, reminding them that anything could happen out there. He warned them not to trust anything too easily, and if things ever felt overwhelming, they shouldn't hesitate. Just retreat immediately. Without wasting more time, Rimmer ordered them to move out. Normally, the journey would have taken about a month, but since the roads had been cleared, they would now reach their destination in just 2 weeks. Rayon took charge, commanding the group to form 4 lines and move according to their assigned squads. It wasn't just Rayon's physical strength and aura that stood out, his mental fortitude and keen perception were also something to be proud of. Because of that, Rimmer believed Rayon and the others would handle this mission well. But in truth, Rimmer had lied to the trainees. He had said he wouldn't accompany them, but he actually planned to secretly follow and watch over them from the shadows. Meanwhile, a suspicious group, looking very much like assassins, was also gathering, and they too were heading toward the same village Rayon and his group were traveling to. On their journey to a village called Cebu, Rayon and his group run into members from the 6th training ground. The 6th squad is led by someone named Kane Zeekhart. Rayon asks why the 6th squad members are there, and in return, Kane asks why the 5th squad is there as well. Rayon had heard about Kane before. He was once injured and bedridden for a long time, but now it seems Kane has recovered enough to rejoin the 6th training squad. With his skills, Kane could easily be considered a high-level swordsman. Kane then explains that they're heading to Cebu Village for an orc extermination mission. He asks Rayon what business his squad has there. Rayon replies that they're on the same mission, to eliminate the orcs in Cebu. Kane then questions whether both squads were given the same mission, as the 6th squad wasn't informed about this. Rayon is a bit surprised by this too, since he also wasn't told that another squad would be involved. We're then taken to the night before the departure, at a bar on the outskirts of the city. There, Rimmer is proudly talking about his students from the 5th training ground. He boasts how they completed their previous mission by defeating a group of bandits and confidently believes they'll succeed in this orc extermination mission as well. Suddenly, the instructor of the 6th squad approaches Rimmer and suggests that the orc mission should be handed over entirely to the 6th squad instead. He argues that orc extermination requires teamwork, not just individual strength, something the 5th squad lacks due to its focus on individual skill. Recently, the 6th squad completed an extremely difficult training course without losing a single member, so their teamwork has improved. Because of that, he insists the mission should go to them. Rimmer responds, "Are you really that concerned about the 5th squad getting all the attention lately?" He then proposes a new idea. Send both the 5th and 6th squads together. The orcs need to be dealt with before they become a serious threat to the village. By turning it into a shared mission and letting both squads compete, The job will get done faster and more thoroughly. Rimmer then asks the 6th Squad's instructor if he agrees. The instructor nods and says he'll request permission from the head of the family. Back to where the 2 squads are gathered. Burren speaks up, saying there might have been a misunderstanding between the instructors about this mission. He tells the 6th Squad they can go back. The 5th Squad alone is enough to handle the mission. Kane takes offense at Burren's remark, saying he's being arrogant just because he's from the 5th Training Squad. Is that confidence just because you're from the 5th Squad? Kane then argues that this mission requires teamwork, and the 6th Squad is clearly superior in that area. The 5th Squad lacks any real experience in group cooperation, so they're bound to struggle. Burren replies that while he acknowledges Kane's abilities, he shouldn't underestimate the 5th Squad. Watching the heated exchange between Kane and Burren, Rayon starts to wonder if the instructors, especially Rimmer, had predicted this would happen. So, why didn't they say anything before sending them out? Rimmer values hands-on experience and considers it essential for a noble. From his perspective, a real-life monster extermination mission is invaluable. But most importantly, it's a chance for the students to learn teamwork and strategy, the true key to success in any monster hunt. Additionally, the 5th Squad still lacked experience in teamwork and strategy. That's probably why Rimmer intentionally set them up to compete with the 6th Squad, whose reputation was rising. He likely wanted them to realize for themselves that the 5th Squad still had a long way to go. Thinking about it that way, Rayon found Rimmer to be incredibly cunning. And suddenly, everything made sense. It was clear that they were meant to experience firsthand just how important teamwork really is. With all that in mind, Rayon recalled what his mother told him before he left. She said she wanted to see him become a swordsman who protects others. Snapping back to the present, Rayon looked at Burren and Kane, who were still arguing. He stepped in and told them to calm down. Arguing any further would just be a waste of time. He pointed out that they should already know this problem couldn't be solved through words alone. So, Rayon suggested settling things with a match between the 2 squads. Burren questioned the idea, asking if it was really okay to fight each other before the mission even began. It seemed reckless. They didn't even know what kind of threats they would face yet. Rayon replied that one squad clearly wasn't willing to back down, and Burren himself had no intention of handing the mission over to the 6th Squad either. Rayon then explained, since this was an extermination mission, the orcs would likely appear in large numbers, and that meant there was a high chance a high orc would be leading them. So here was the plan. Whichever squad wins the match would take the lead in the mission. The losing squad would play support. They'd work together to defeat the orc leader, break up the orc group, and complete the mission as planned. If the leading squad couldn't handle the orcs, the support squad would step in and take over. Kane agreed. It wasn't a bad idea. With that settled, the 2 squads headed up the nearby mountain to begin their match. And just like that, the battle started. Burren, Martha, and the other 5th Squad members charged toward the 6th Squad. The rules were simple: defeat the entire team or capture their flag. Martha, however, didn't think they needed a strategy. She believed brute force was enough, and underestimated the 6th Squad, thinking she could take them all down on her own. So, she charged straight in and began the fight. Meanwhile, Rayon was sitting quietly in the back, using his skill, the legendary senses, allowing him to visualize the entire battlefield and predict how the fight would unfold. Runan, watching with him, asked if it was really okay to let everyone fight without a plan. Rayon replied that they were all too confident and wouldn't listen to him anyway. Runan then asked if they still had a chance of winning. Rayon calmly answered that he was certain their squad would lose, and lose badly. And he was right. During the battle, Martha and Burren struggled against the 6 squad members. One by one, they were defeated and forced to retreat back to Rayon's position, completely crushed. Rayon looked at them and asked, "Was it really as easy as you thought?" Judging by their condition, they were clearly ready to give up. They'd been defeated, but the world doesn't stop just because they're getting stronger. They couldn't afford to underestimate their opponents just because the Kingdom of Owen had ignored them in the past. Rayon went on, saying their defeat was only natural. They fought without any strategy, without teamwork, and without taking the time to understand their enemies. On top of that, they wasted energy, aura, and even revealed their techniques too early. As swordsmen, they trained every single day. But just because the 5th Squad had shown better performance recently didn't mean they could look down on the 6th Squad. Runan then asked, "So, does that mean the 5th Squad is going to lose?" Rayon answered, "We still have a chance." Hearing that, Burren and Martha were stunned, but they immediately declared that they were willing to do whatever it took to win. Seeing that the 5th Squad still had the will to fight, Rayon finally began giving them instructions, showing them how they could still win. On the other side, after their victory in the previous battle, the members of the 6th Squad became even more confident. Some even started getting cocky. But there was still one member who reminded the others not to get arrogant, since the 5th Squad had once defeated a group of bandits. Besides, it was highly likely that the 5th Squad wouldn't give up so easily and would return soon. And sure enough, Martha suddenly appeared right in front of them, ready for a second round. Without wasting a word, Martha charged straight in. The 6th Squad quickly focused their aura to block her attack. But this time, Martha's strike landed cleanly, catching them completely off guard. At the same time, Burren was also attacking other members of the 6th Squad. Just like Martha, Burren's assault hit its mark. Surprised by the success of Byrne's attack, the 6th Squad noticed something strange. His movements had changed. Both Martha and Byrne were fighting in a completely different way compared to before. That raised a question in their minds. What made them change their fighting style so drastically? The battle continued, with Martha now leading the charge. As she fought, she began to realize Rayon had been right. Earlier, Rayon had asked his teammates why they lost the first match, even though they clearly had the advantage in both skill and power. Byrne had guessed, was it because of information and strategy? Rayon confirmed he was right. Before the match, the 6th Squad had analyzed every member of the 5th Squad and came up with strategies to counter each of them individually. Meanwhile, the 5th Squad had simply assumed they could win with brute force and didn't prepare at all. As a result, they had to retreat without even getting the chance to fight properly against opponents they normally could have beaten. Rayon also pointed out that the 6th Squad hadn't even burned through much of their stamina or aura yet, unlike the 5th Squad, who had wasted theirs. Yes, the 5th Squad was at a disadvantage now, but they weren't the only ones capable of using information and strategy. Hearing that, Byrne asked if Rayon had a plan. Rayon responded that Kane had already heightened his vision and awareness. Thanks to that, he could now observe all movements from a distance and deploy the right team members to counter any attack from the 5th Squad. In Kane's strategy, for someone like Martha, whose strength lies in raw power and endurance, but who uses fairly straightforward attacks, he would assign a swordsman who could block her strikes while draining her aura at the same time. Meanwhile, to counter Byrne, who fights with precise yet straightforward swordplay, Rayon figured the best match would be someone skilled at reading attacks. That way, Byrne wouldn't be able to land any effective strikes. So, the best solution for the 5th Squad was to switch opponents. However, Rayon knew the members of the 5th Squad wouldn't easily agree to that. So, he came up with a backup plan. He ordered everyone to change their fighting styles. Rayon explained that while the stances of the 6th Squad were solid, especially the one fighting Martha, their aura flow was weak. That left small openings in their defense. Because of that, Rayon told everyone to sharpen their senses, find those openings, and strike. After hearing this, Martha and Byrne were shocked. Wait, isn't Rayon just standing quietly in the back? How is he explaining everything like he saw it all firsthand? Rayon simply replied, Kane's instincts are impressive, but when it comes to instinct, mine are even sharper. Back to the battle. Everything was going according to plan. Even Renan didn't seem like she would lose. Then suddenly, Kane appeared at Rayon's location. At that moment, Kane still couldn't sense anything unusual from Rayon. With no other option, he decided to search for the 5th Squad's flag. Kane muttered, No wonder I lost control of the situation. Rayon's already been giving orders to the rest of the squad. He also mentioned hearing rumors that Rayon had a fire-attributed aura. Kane then released his aura. Seeing it, Rayon was a bit surprised. They shared the same elemental attribute. Kane added that his aura level was higher than Rayon's, and he had more of it too. In Kane's mind, that meant Rayon was no match for him. Provoked, Rayon unleashed his own aura, and just like that, their fight began. Rayon struck first. As Kane analyzed the attack, he recalled the rumors. Rayon had defeated both Martha and Prince Owen. Even though Rayon's aura was supposedly inferior in level, its power was undeniable. Still, Kane believed he was stronger. Their sword clash continued for quite some time. But then, Rayon's aura overwhelmed and consumed Kane's, completely catching him off guard. Rayon followed up with another strike, and eventually, Kane was defeated. After winning, Rayon calmly said, What's the point of having an elemental advantage if you still end up losing? Soon, all the 5th Squad members gathered around Rayon, with Kane lying in defeat. Byrne asked, Did you plan for this all along? That Kane would come for the flag once he got desperate. Just like Rayon had predicted, everything had gone smoothly in taking down the 6th Squad. Even Martha admitted it. She had initially planned to ignore Rayon's orders, but because things worked out so well, she changed her mind. Once again, the entire 5th Squad acknowledged Rayon as their number one. From now on, they would follow his every command without complaint. Hearing all of this, Rayon felt genuinely happy. This battle had helped everyone grow, even if just a little. He then addressed the team with a few words. You all did a great job today. Rayon also reminded them that this match had taught them an important lesson, how dangerous blind confidence and arrogance can be, and what kind of outcome you get when you act without a solid strategy. If this had been a real battle, all of us would have been dead. So don't forget what you learned today. On the other hand, Kane's perspective on Rayon had changed. He now realized that Rayon was far more capable than he initially thought, sharper, more composed, and refined both mentally and physically. At first, Kane assumed the 5th Squad was arrogant, but now he saw that the truly arrogant one was himself. Kane then approached Rayon and admitted that he too had learned something. Thanks to Rayon, Kane realized that letting his guard down was a mistake that should never happen, and having a backup plan was essential in case the original strategy failed. Kane still believed that the 6th Squad had better teamwork, especially since he had gathered some intel on the 5th Squad beforehand. But in the end, not only did the 6th Squad lose, Kane was also completely outclassed in both leadership and one-on-one combat against Rayon. He used to think he was stronger, but it turned out to be nothing more than baseless pride. He had learned a lot from that match, and for that, Cain now felt indebted to Rayon. Seeing this side of Cain, Rayon started to think that Cain was different from the other direct bloodline descendants he had met before. Cain actually seemed like a decent person. Rayon then said that the match had also been a valuable learning experience for him. Following that, Cain reminded him of their earlier agreement, that the 6th Squad would serve as support for the 5th Squad during the Orc extermination mission. We then skip ahead to 2 weeks after the mission had begun. Cebu Village was a small, unremarkable place, with no special products or tourist spots. It was home to just a handful of villagers who made a living through farming. Their mission this time was nothing more than a routine patrol. Occasionally, monsters would cross through Cebu Village, so this wasn't considered a special assignment. But Raon couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched from behind. Raon suspected it wasn't the instructors tailing them. This sensation felt different. It was as if an enemy was observing their strength, carefully assessing them from the shadows. Given the situation, Raon decided to stay alert while pretending to be unaware. Then, he called Burin over and said that for this mission, he wanted Burin to take command and issue the orders. Surprised, Burin asked why the sudden change. Raon explained that in their first mission, it had only been him and Runan who fought the Snow Tiger, so this time, it would be better for Burin to take the initiative. Besides, hadn't Burin once said on the first day of training that he wanted to fight alongside Raon again? Raon added, "You weren't just saying that, right? So now's your chance. Show the results of all your hard work." Hearing this, Burin was left speechless. In the end, he accepted Raon's request to take command for the current mission and promised to show how much he had grown. Raon then turned to the rest of the squad and told them to follow Burin's orders from now on, including Martha. Martha agreed, saying she'd follow Raon's instructions and listen to Burin, but only if they delivered actual results. Suddenly, the Wrath Spirit appeared, and Raon asked if it could sense someone nearby, watching them. The Wrath Spirit responded, noting that Raon had also sensed the presence of someone observing them. Raon then asked where that person was and how many there were. But the Wrath Spirit replied that it wouldn't reveal the location of him. The moment Raon heard the word him instead of them, he deduced that there was only one person watching them, not multiple enemies. Annoyed by how quickly Raon figured it out, the Wrath Spirit grew irritated. Meanwhile, Raon reminded himself not to jump to conclusions just yet. There was only one person watching them, but that didn't mean they were alone. There could be others hiding nearby. That's why he couldn't afford to let his guard down. We then cut to the group of mysterious figures observing Raon and his team. Just as Raon suspected, the observer wasn't alone. There were indeed others hidden away. Only one had been actively watching. The person sitting down turned to the scout and asked, "Who are the people staying in Cebu Village?" The observer replied that they seemed to be from Zeekhart. Judging by their movements, they weren't official knights, just novices on their second mission, likely since they weren't accompanied by an instructor. The seated figure then asked, "Are you sure they didn't notice you while you were spying?" The observer responded confidently, "Of course not. There's no way a bunch of rookies could sense my presence." Then the one sitting down remarked that perhaps the villagers, being unusually sensitive to changes, had asked for help due to the increasing orc activity. He also mentioned that they had expected to find the Monostone quickly, but clearly it was going to take longer than anticipated. It turned out that these mysterious people had come to Cebu Village in search of a Monostone, though its location remained unknown. The observer then suggested, "Should we just wipe them all out now? This is the perfect chance to eliminate some future Zeekhart talents." But the one in charge shook his head and said they should hold back for now. He proposed releasing a few monsters first, to avoid drawing suspicion. If they attacked directly, the Zeekharts might realize the Mana Stone was nearby. By sending monsters, they could make the Zeekhart trainees think their mission was complete and prompt them to leave the area. Once they were gone, the group would return and destroy Cebu Village, leaving nothing behind. Then the man who had been sitting calmly stood up, placed an orc mask over his face, and transformed into an orc-like creature. This video ends here, but the story isn't over yet. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next part.